to lab. Today we're going to be going over for loops, and before we get started, just a quick piece of insight here on the first slide. I found it pretty true in my personal experience, and as you go through in your computer science curriculum and classes and doing more programming, I'm sure you'll find some truth in it as well. But let's get started. So why a loop? So for example, let's say we want to print I love EECS 20 times, which I'm sure we all do. With a loop, we can do this in 3 lines, right? And don't worry if you don't know what's going on in the for loop itself. We'll go over that in detail in a couple slides. But just know that these 3 lines will successfully print I love EECS 20 times. Without a loop, we're going to have to put the cout statement in our code 20 times physically, right? And as you can see, we don't really want to do that. And Gordon Ramsay will be really upset with you if you do, and we don't want that to happen at all. So in summary, we're going to avoid code duplication, right? Which, as you can see from our example, 3 versus 20, we'd rather have 3 lines of code do the same amount of work that 20 lines of code would do, 20 repeated lines, right? We don't want that. It also allows us to run the same code a finite number of times. So that's kind of the overall goal of loops, right? And there's 2 kinds of loops. We can have count and event controlled, and today we're only going to have time to go over count controlled. So count controlled loops are loops that are run a set number of times, and we'll go over the syntax right now. So the basic format, right? So we're going to have a for loop, and for loops in our parentheses here for our for loop is we're going to set how many times the code is run. That's where we're going to specify that. And then inside the 2 curly braces here is the code that we actually want to be repeated. So let's look at our example from the beginning of our slides today. So as you can see here, this is the same for loop, except the cout statement changed to I still love EECS 183, which I hope is the case. And as you can see, we have our for loop, and let's go over the individual components of the area that specifies how many times this loop is going to be run. So the first thing we have here is int I equals 0, and that is our initialize step right here, right? So our initialize step is going to create the variable that we're going to use to keep track of how many times our loop is being run. So in this case, it's going to be an integer that starts at 0. The next step here is our condition. So this is where we're going to check our condition, and basically it's kind of the rule for how many times this loop is going to be run. So our loop is going to run until that condition evaluates to false. So in our case, our loop is going to keep running until this integer I becomes equal to or greater than 20, right? That's when this condition would be false. Lastly, we have our update step here. So this is going to say, after each time we run our code, what are we going to do with I? And in our case, we're going to increment or add 1 to I after every time our loop is run. So the order of steps, as you can see here, is we're going to initialize, check our condition, we're going to run the code itself, and then we're going to update our variable, and then we're going to go to step 2, which is checking our condition. So let's do a quick example. So pop quiz, but not really a pop quiz. So how many times will this cout statement run? So let's go over this and just walk through this so we can kind of see how these order of steps apply to a different example, right? So first things first, we're going to initialize, right? So here we have int I equals 4. So that means that an integer that we're going to be keeping track of is I, and it's going to start at 4. So let's write that down right here. I equals 4, right? Now what is step 2 again? Step 2 is check condition, right? So we have 1, initialize, and then 2, check condition. So we're going to check our condition. Is I less than or equal to 8? 4 is less than or equal to 8. Great. We're going to keep going to step 3, which was run code, right? So we're going to cout, wow, look how much I've learned today. So pretend this is kind of our screen here, and we're going to say, wow, look how much I've learned today, blah, 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 right? And then 4th step is going to be to update our variable, right? So now our update step is here. I equals I plus 2. Before, we were just incrementing I. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set I to our previous I, which is 4 right now, plus 2. So what does that become? 6, right? So I is now 6. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to step 2, remember? So now we're going to check our condition again. So here's our condition. Is 6 less than or equal to 8? Yes, great. So now go to step 3, run our code, right? So again, we're going to print out, wow, look at how much I've learned today, blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to update I. So now I is 6 right now, and we're going to add 2 to 6, and now I becomes, say it with me, yeah, 8. Cool. So now I is 8, and now we're going to check our condition again, right? We're going to go back to step 2, and is I less than or equal to 8? Yes, because I is equal to 8, so this condition is still true, so we still want to keep running our loop, right? So we're going to check our condition. It's true. Run our code again. Wow, look how much I've learned today. And then we're going to update I to become 10, right? And now go back to step 2 where we check our condition. Now, is I less than or equal to 8? No, because 10 is greater than 8, right? So this condition is now false. So once the condition evaluates to false, we're going to end our loop. So now our code will jump to whatever comes next after your for loop in your code. So after this code is run, we would have executed this cout statement here 3 times. So that's just kind of a quick example of how to approach these count control loops. And hope you guys had a great day at lab today. Class is a little bit short, but you know, sometimes it's like that. So have a good day.